Hello there! I get to take off my mask. How exciting is that? Amazing. So, yes, like Tommy said, welcome to Atlas Homechurch. And what's cool about Atlas? Official shirts! That's right. Get pumped. So, also like Tommy said, we are in the book of Daniel, a really exciting book. And good news if you're new here, we just started this book last week. So you didn't miss much. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah.
That's exciting. And there's a whole bunch more to talk about. And so, like he said, we're into Daniel 2, a really exciting chapter. And this teaching titled it Dreams and Revelations because it talks about dreams and revelations. So, little on the nose, I know, but that's for a purpose, as you can see. So, let's talk a little bit about dreams. How many people here like dreaming? Who does dreams? A lot of dreaming. Adi hates dreams. Okay. Fair enough. Honestly, I've met people who only really have nightmares, so that's fair. So, in terms of dreams, I wanted to talk about one of my favorite shows. You probably haven't heard of it, but it's called Avatar: The Last Airbender. And Loki's looking at me like, I've seen that. I've definitely seen that. Good. So, in Avatar, there's this episode called Nightmares and Daydreams, where Aang, who is the last airbender, is getting ready to fight the Fire Lord Ozai. This isn't actually him, but this is his dream version. And every time he gets there, he barges down in his dream, gets to the door, and says, "It's time, you're going down." And the first time, he forgets his pants. And then the second time, and each time he's dressed in a different anime costume, which I really appreciate. So that's exciting. And in reality, Aang just needed a little bit of sleep. He just needed a nice nap, right? I think we can all relate to that. Sometimes you just need a nice nap, you know? But Aang's dreams didn't exactly represent the actual future. That was more of a concerning thing. He was more concerned about the future to come. But tonight, we're actually going to talk about a dream that did predict the future. A dream that predicted the future pretty mysteriously accurate, to be honest. And so that's what we're talking about tonight. But first, we're going to get into some prayer. So can I get one person to pray for me? Probably Cody. And then I'll pray, and then we'll get started.
Yeah, Lord, we'd just like to thank you that we can all get together in person tonight, despite everything that's been going on with COVID. I really like to be praying, Lord, that Daniel can just be a really cool book that we go over this semester. And I really like to be praying that you can be speaking through Zeb and Zach as they do start Daniel up tonight. And I'd just like to pray that this semester can be full of a lot of cool outreach and a lot of cool opportunities that you bring to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, Father, thank you so much for an opportunity just to get up here and teach about the book of Daniel. Such an amazing book. Really looking forward to just talking about Daniel 2 tonight and talking about how you really are a God that reveals things and a God who is here and who is active in the world today. So I thank you for that and really looking forward to just discussing this and having some cool discussion about it later. So we pray this in Christ's name. Amen. So, just in case you missed last week's teaching taught by my friend Ian and Logan, here's a little recap for you guys, the road so far. So, in Daniel 1, it talks about the title character, Daniel, and his three other friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. And these guys were Israelites living in Jerusalem. And they were captured by the Babylonian Empire and then taken to Babylon. So if you don't know anything about Jerusalem, that was kind of a small rinky-dink town, all right? Not much going on there. But then they were brought to this huge city empire of Babylon. And so their life changed pretty drastically. In fact, they got renamed. They couldn't have their old Israelite names. They had to get brand new names that reflected the city of Babylon. They had to learn whole new customs. They had to eat different food. They had to learn all of these things basically to become Babylonian. Because that's what the goal was of capturing these guys. They were pretty young at the time. So Babylon was going around capturing teenagers and kind of making them into Babylonians. And the one thing, though, with all the renaming, with all of these new customs, the one thing that these four guys did not do is they refused to compromise on their relationship with the Lord. They refused to eat food that was dedicated to other idols. And in fact, they even stood and said, can we please not eat this food dedicated to these idols, but instead, can you give us just some fruit and some vegetables? And so they were given these fruits and vegetables, and instead of growing weaker and not being as healthy as the other people, God blesses them and they end up stronger. They end up more wise than any of the people in this group of people. And the Bible says that God blessed them and they became the best of the best. There was no one better in all of the kingdom than these Israelites. And so that's where we are in this story. These guys are being trained up to become like the king's wise men and working in the palace. And on the other side of the coin, though, we have the events that are taking place tonight in Daniel 2. And so this is taking place in the palace where King Nebuchadnezzar slept not so soundly. Daniel 2, 1 through 3 says, in the second year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. His mind was troubled, and he could not sleep. So the king summoned the magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers to tell him what he had dreamed. When they came in and stood before the king, he said to them, I've had a dream that troubles me, and I want to know what it means. So basically, the king was having trouble sleeping, similar to Aang in The Last Airbender, in that one episode that I talked about. But when the Bible says that he was having trouble sleeping, this isn't just he just needed some warm milk and then off to bed with him. No, this was like a deep disturbance where he just could not sleep at all. He was very concerned, very troubled about the dream he had. And so, because he was so worried about this dream, he decided, I have to call in my best, wisest men here so that they can come and tell me what this dream's about. So the astrologers come in, they say, all right, your highness, we're here. Let's do this. Business as usual. The astrologers answered the king and says, may the king live forever. So they start by buttering up a little bit and then said, tell your servants the dream, then we'll interpret it. So it makes sense. This is the way it goes. Your king has a dream, tells the dream to the servants, they give him an interpretation, everyone goes home afterwards, all right? Fantastic. Not so much this time, though. The king replied to the astrologers, this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me what my dream was and interpret it, I will have you cut into pieces and your houses turned to piles of rubble. But if you tell me the dream and explain it, you'll receive from me gifts, rewards, honors. So just go ahead, tell me what I dreamed and interpret it for me. Piece of cake, right? Just tell me what I dreamed. You should know, right? You're the wisest, the astrologers, the divine people who speak with the gods. Just tell me what it was that I dreamed. So these guys, turns out that was a little concerning to them because they didn't exactly know what the king had dreamed. But these guys are the wise men of Babylon, right? One of some of the best, most intelligent people around. They speak to the gods. They're the sorcerers, enchanters. They look at the stars and they get all this divine information. Surely they have an explanation. They have a way to continue this without any trouble. So what they say, let the king tell his servants the dream, then we will interpret it. So basically they're like, hey, can you please tell me the dream? Please don't make me guess. And these guys were pretty concerned because generally being cut into pieces and having your house burned down, that's a generally bad time, to be honest. I don't know if that's ever happened to you. It's honestly not the greatest time in the world. And so they're like, please tell us what your dream is. The king, though, he didn't like that too much. He didn't like their response. Then the king answered, I am certain that you are trying to gain time because you realize that this is what I have firmly decided. If you do not tell me the dream, there is only one penalty for you. You have conspired to tell me misleading and wicked things, hoping the situation will change. So then tell me the dream, and I will know that you can interpret it for me. The astrologers answered the king, there is no one on earth who can do what the king asks. No king, however great or mighty, has ever asked such a thing of any magician, enchanter, or astrologer. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. This made the king so angry that, furious, he ordered the execution of all the wise men of Babylon. So the decree was issued to put the wise men to death, and men were sent to look for Daniel and his friends to put them to death. So here's where these two, Daniel 1 and Daniel 2, kind of cross paths here. They were being trained, Daniel and his friends, to become the wise men of Babylon, but now all the wise men are being told to put to death. The king wanted proof, right? That was why he did this. He was convinced that in order to get a good interpretation of this dream, that the people would have to know what he had dreamed already. He had needed 100% assurance that there was some higher force at play, some divine answer for this interpretation. Because that's how serious he took this dream. These guys, these wise men of Babylon, the king's best and brightest, they didn't have an answer for that. Look at their response. What the king asks is too difficult. No one can reveal it to the king except the gods, and they do not live among humans. So these wise men, for all that they claimed, all of their, ability to talk to the gods and talk to, people from the dead, all these divine, powers and abilities they had, at the end of the day, they did not believe in revelation. So if you know what revelation is, basically, it means that God reveals something to someone else. God is revealing information, revealing things of the future. And that is a lot what we're going to be talking about tonight, is this aspect of revelation, because that's what the king was asking for. The king was asking for someone to be able to get direct intervention from God, from some supernatural power, to be able to tell him what this dream meant. And at the end of the day, these wise men, they did not believe in revelation. They were determined and confident that they could rely on their reasoning skills, that they could just go up and trick the king, basically, with their intelligence, to pretend as if they were able to communicate with God. But here they say, no one can do this. There is no such thing as revelation. No one has this ability. And they're not the only ones who believe this, though, right? There's a lot of people in this world who don't believe in revelation. They don't believe that God is maybe even real, or they don't believe that if he is real, that he talks to us, to talk to people. And honestly, this situation of revelation in this chapter has kind of sparked a really interesting debate. Not just the debate of whether there really is a thing as revelation, but a debate on when the book of Daniel was written to begin with. Now that might sound interesting, right? What is the connection between Revelation and the dating of the book of Daniel? Let's take a look at this. So Christians, a lot of Christians, theologists, people who study the Bible, who believe what the book of Daniel actually says, believe that Daniel was written around 500 BC. A lot of atheists and other secular scholars believe, though, that originally they dated this at 70 AD. Why the huge difference? Well, it's because there's one little problem with the book of Daniel. And that is that every single person who reads it, everyone who studies the book of Daniel, agree on the same exact point, that Daniel knew way too much about the future. He knew way too much accurate, real, provable information. And so, because he knew that, and there was no denying that he knew that because he wrote it down, there sparked these two different camps. Camp one, saying that God gave Daniel divine revelation about the future. Or camp two, the only way Daniel could have known all this information is if he was alive after the fact. So therefore, their conclusion, Daniel was just written much later than we originally thought. And originally, they believed that 70 AD was the year that it was written. That was what they determined because that was well after all of Daniel's predictions of the future came true. They're like, this is when it was written. He knew all about all these facts beforehand. Case closed. That's our decision. But then another interesting factor came into play. Who here has heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls? Yeah, a lot of people, right? The Dead Sea Scrolls added another interesting layer of intrigue because inside the Dead Sea Scrolls was pieces of the book of Daniel. And scholars, no matter how hard they tried, could not place the Dead Sea Scrolls any earlier than 165 BC. So they changed their mind. They said, okay, well, obviously the book of Daniel had to have been written before 70 AD, well before, 100 years before. And so they decided, okay, here's our new dating, 165 BC. That is the lesser of two evils, where we don't have to admit that Revelation is real, but we can say that, some of these things Daniel knew about. The rest, he just kind of guessed. He's a really good guesser. So that's kind of how we'll land on that. So you might be wondering, though, so what about actual evidence about why they believed that this book was dated so late? What is the evidence? Well, here's one of the biggest reasons why scholars believe that it was written a lot later. Welcome to the Daniel late date reasoning chart, brought to you by Zebco. So, here is the Daniel late date. This is they decided it was dated later. Why was it dated later? Because there's no such thing as supernatural. Revelation doesn't exist. It's impossible. Okay, let's play scientific method. Let's ask some questions. Let's be scientists here. Put on your science coats. So why is there no supernatural? Because God doesn't exist. Fantastic. Okay, moving on. God doesn't exist. Why not? There's no evidence for him. Okay, but what about the book of Daniel that's filled with prophecies that came true? Daniel's not evidence. It was written later. So we arrived at the late date. Are you seeing the problem here? It's a circle. What came first, the chicken or the egg? They're using their own argument to solve and reason their own argument. That is called a circular fallacy. It means that you are creating this circle where you try to prove yourself by proving yourself. And there's no original founding evidence that actually gets you to where you want to be. So it was their presupposition that God doesn't exist, that supernatural revelation doesn't occur, that led them to believe that God doesn't exist and supernatural revelation doesn't occur. And so this is the reason why this Daniel late date, people try to play this card. But their presupposition gets in the way. You can't prove a statement is true just because the statement is true. You can't say 3 is equal to 3 because 3 is equal to 3. It doesn't make sense. So, we have this issue then, because if we're going to continue along the lines of, okay, maybe the late date isn't the most reasonable thing. So, then are we moving on thinking and realizing, okay, so then the next solution is that God actually gave Daniel this revelation, right? So is there evidence for that? Well, there is. Continuing on in the passage. 14 through 18. When Arioch, the commander of the king's guard, had gone out to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact. I just want to pause right here to show that Daniel was like a guy that was very easy to get along with and also someone who was well respected in the Babylonian Empire already. Like, this guy was sent to go kill him and like get his people to kill him. You typically don't listen to the people you're about to kill. But this guy did, which just shows what kind of guy Daniel was, that he actually probably cared and had a real relationship with this Arioch guy. And so because of that and because of their history, he was willing to hear Daniel out in the situation. But so Daniel spoke to him with wisdom. He asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went into the king and asked for time, so that he might interpret the dream for him. Then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. He urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel comes and faces this problem that he doesn't want to be executed. And so he goes to the three best Christians that he knows. Well, they're the only Christians he knows, actually. There's only 4 of them. But they were still pretty exceptional guys. And these exceptional guys who were considered better than anyone in the entire city, these guys who were smart, who were strong, that God had blessed in every conceivable way, their reaction to this was not to go stand up and try to fight and fight for their life, not to do any of these things, but instead, their reaction was, we need to get together and we need to pray to the Lord for help. That was their reaction. Asking for help from the God of the universe. A pretty sound strategy, if you ask me. This was probably the first college prayer meeting, right? These guys were about our age, college age, and they got together and they decided that the best course of action was to talk to the Lord about all this. And so when the going got tough, the tough got praying. That was their solution. I think this is a good point. And I think it should lead us to think, what is our reaction when things go wrong? Typically, I just started student teaching, and so my days have suddenly gone from having all the free time in the world to actually working for a living, except I don't get paid, so that's on top of everything. But when I'm having a rough day, my first reaction is normally I need to go home and sleep for 3 hours, then I need to eat a bunch of food, and then I need to watch TV for 2 hours, and then go to bed and repeat. Sometimes, a lot of the time, my reaction isn't to go to the Lord in prayer and ask him for help, to ask him for discernment, to ask him for assistance. But Daniel and them, that was their reaction. I think it's no big thing that people know that the COVID situation has caused a lot of friction in people's lives, right? Raise your hand if the COVID pandemic has affected you in a lot of ways. Yeah, right? I know for me, it's been really hard to resist the call of isolationism, right? Just be alone, just sit around, just watch TV, relax, have my me time. That's what they're calling for us to do, right? Stay at home, relax, take a load off, and then that started in March, and then March, turned to August turned to December. Now we're almost done with January. And the desire to just lean back and just go and just follow the same pattern that everyone else is going in is really, really powerful. I know. I feel it. The people who are teaching this book this semester, the book of Daniel, we're all reading this book by John Lennox, who's a pretty well-known Christian scholar, called Against the Flow. And honestly, I think that is one of the most spot-on types. And said, no, I'm not going to just silently go into the night and just continue down this path as everyone else. I'm going to stand. I'm going to rely on the Lord. Because he's the only one who is able to help. He's the only one who's able to get me through this. He's the only one who is able to get me to a position where my life is actually meaningful. And a lot of that starts with our prayer life. God wants us to talk with him, wants us to get involved with him, wants to hear what's going on. Because he cares about us. He cares about us so much. And so as we study this book throughout this semester, I really encourage people to keep this in their mind, going against the flow. Standing up in this world of COVID, just saying, I'm not going to just give in to the same stuff that everyone else is giving into. I'm going to stand against it. I'm going to fight for the Lord. And when we do that, when we do fight for the Lord, when we take our struggles to him, some really amazing things happen. 24 through 26 says, Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said, oh, hold on, there it is. During the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven and said, Praise be to the name of God forever and ever. Wisdom and power are his. He changes times and seasons. He deposes kings and raises up others. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. I thank and praise you, God of my ancestors. You have given me wisdom and power. You have made known to me what we asked of you. You have made known to us the dream of the king. So Daniel and his friends prayed. They asked for help. And what happened? God came through. We asked ourselves earlier, right? Is there such a thing as revelation? The answer is a resounding yes right here. God came to Daniel and gave him this revelation. That was all God. Now, I'm probably not the only one here who sometimes thinks this, but sometimes when I'm talking about like revelation or prophecy, I can feel kind of awkward. I can feel kind of like, kind of like just embarrassed because it's kind of, like, we think sometimes that this is kind of a weird topic, right? You know, it's like, imagine you invite a friend out to CT or IP, and it's like, please just be a normal message about love and peace, and then it's just like, tonight we're talking about the end times and revelations and the dark arts and all these things, and you're like, oh no, oh God, here we go. Like, I don't know, that's my reaction sometimes. But while studying for this teaching, I got a really cool opportunity to kind of just absorb what prophecy and revelation really is, and kind of got a different perspective on it. Because it's not this thing to be ashamed of, to be embarrassed of. In fact, this is like one of the most amazing, crucial parts of our faith. If we believe in the authenticity of the Bible, if we believe that it is a credible thing that is real, wouldn't we want to be able to prove that? And that's what prophecy is. That's what revelation is. It is actual, tangible proof that the Bible is legit, that God is real, and that God is someone who interacts with people. God is not just a silent observer. He is actually taking part in the world today. Like, not even just today as a Daniel, but like today, here, now. God does step in. He still does do these things. I can't tell you how many times there's been times where I've been really struggling with something. And then all of a sudden, I'm like trying to read something, or like I'm talking with someone, listening to a teaching, and then just in that moment, like, they say something that really helps me or really strikes me. And I realize, like, wow, that's exactly what I needed to hear in this moment. That's exactly what I needed to kind of get back on my horse and go out there and love people again. So God is still working. He's still here today. So there is such a thing as revelation. It is a real thing that still happens. And Daniel is about to show this to King Nebuchadnezzar, that revelation is real. Verse 24 through 26, Then Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed to execute the wise men of Babylon, and said to him, Do not execute the wise men of Babylon. Take me to the king, and I will interpret his dream for him. Arioch took Daniel to the king at once and said, I have found a man among the exiles from Judah who can tell the king what the dream means. The king asked Daniel, Are you able to tell me what I saw in my dream and interpret it? So it's time. It's the big moment, right? It's time to go. He's finally there. He's on the king's on the edge of the seat. Like, you're going to tell me? I'm finally going to know what my dream is and what the interpretation is? Everyone who would be there, all the wise men of Babylon probably behind Daniel, just like praying through the knees that he gets this right and actually knows what's happening. Otherwise, they're all going to die and get their head chopped off and their house burned down. Like, that's intense. And so all of a sudden, they're leaning in. He's like, All right, king, I have your answer. And he's like, Yes. And they're like, Yes. And he says, No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain the king the mystery he asked about. Okay, well, thanks for trying, Daniel. Kill all of them. Kill all of them now, please. Okay, that probably isn't what happened. I'm guessing Daniel didn't pause there, but I did for dramatic effect. Instead, though, he says no person can do this. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He's shown King Nebuchadnezzar what will happen in days to come. Your dream and the visions that pass through your mind as you were lying in bed are these. So Daniel says no person can do this, but God can. God can reveal mysteries. God does reveal mysteries. Isaiah 44:7 says, "Who then is like me? Let him proclaim it. Let him declare and lay out before me what has happened since I established my ancient people and what is yet to come. Yes, let them foretell what will come." This verse is saying God is basically calling out to anyone who thinks that they have this supernatural power, anyone who thinks that they are actually a God. Go ahead. Tell me what's going to happen tomorrow. Tell me what's going to happen next week. Tell me what's going to happen in 20 minutes. Go ahead. I'm daring you. Come out and show me. And the answer God got to this was cricket noises. Nothing. No one appeared. Because God is the only person who is like God. The only person who can reveal these things. I also want to point out how Daniel was super confident in front of the king here, which I think is pretty funny. He was talking to Nebuchadnezzar while you were in bed, laying down like a little baby, sucking on your thumb, God revealed great mysteries to you. I'd be pretty intimidated to talk about the king in his bed in his jammy pants, honestly. But not Daniel. He was listen, man, here's what happened. While you were sleeping, here's what God was doing. God was working. Bold move, Cotton. See how it pays up. Continuing on, verses 29 through 35. Finally, we have the dream. What is this dream that we've been building up to? As your majesty was lying there, your mind turned to things to come, and the revealer of mysteries showed you what is going to happen. As for me, this mystery has been revealed to me not because I have greater wisdom than anyone else alive, but so that your majesty may know the interpretation, and that you may understand what went through your mind. Your majesty looked, and there before you stood a large statue, an enormous, dazzling statue, awesome in appearance. The head of the statue was made of pure gold, its chest, arms of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of baked clay. While you were watching, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, the gold, they were all broken into pieces and became like a chaff on a threshing floor in the summer. The wind swept them away without leaving a trace, but the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain and filled the whole earth. So there it is. There's the dream. Pretty safe to say there was no chance of any wise men guessing this dream, right? Probably not. It's probably not, top 10 things that they thought this dream would have been about. But no wonder that the king took this so seriously, though, because, like Daniel says, this was revelation to Nebuchadnezzar about the future. All kings want to know about their future of their kingdom, of their rule. So no wonder he took it so seriously. He wanted to make sure without a doubt, 100%, that the interpretation was going to be correct. And so he concluded the only way to do that was to make sure that they knew the dream too, so that it proves that this was from a higher divine source. Basically, to prove that it was from God. So we have statues and big rocks and materials and a lot of really interesting things here, right? But what does it all mean? What is the interpretation? That's what Zach's going to talk about.
All right, so good job, Zeb. You guys got all that? You could tell somebody else this whole story. All right, so Daniel is telling the future. I found this picture. I Googled the word dream, and I just looked at a lot of pictures. And there's this. Okay, see these things? I think those are mouse traps. I don't know why. It doesn't mean anything, but I thought it looked cool. But we're going to talk about the interpretation of this dream, okay? Luckily, we don't have to just interpret this and make something up ourselves. Daniel literally heard from God what the interpretation was. So that's really sweet. So really my main point for this part with that is who should we put our trust in? And that's what we're going to get at here. So you guys ready to get a little more weird? Yeah?
Freaky.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, let's get freaky.
You know, it might be weird, but if this stuff is real and true, you've got to think about what the implications are. Meaning, if God's really telling the future here, what does that mean about his existence and your life and so forth? So, Daniel 2, 36 to 38, the interpretation. You see this statue, this is kind of what somebody envisioned this as, okay, this statue. So it says, this was a dream, now we will tell its interpretation before the king. You, O king, are the king of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given the kingdom, the power, the strength, and the glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, or the beasts of the field, or the birds of the sky, he has given them into your hand and has caused you to rule over them all. You are the head of gold. So I bet Nebuchadnezzar liked this. He said, okay, Nebi, this is you. This is the part of the statue that you represent. So if we go here, you can see my beautiful circle that I did up here. So Babylonia, or Babylon, where he's the king of, or emperor of, this is the head of gold. I want to go back here quick, though. I want to point out this part. It says, now we will tell its interpretation. Is Daniel like schizophrenic here? He's like, or like, you know, like Gollum or something like that. Who's he talking about? Some people interpret this as like Daniel's friends are behind him, so he's saying we are going to interpret it. Other people think it's just like him and the Lord are so close, and he's so humble, he can't say, I'm giving you the interpretation. He's like, now we are. I just think it's a cool attitude, and it's kind of fun to think about. There's like a million interpretations of literally that word. What does that mean, anyway? Of all the things in this passage to focus on. So how do we know this? How do we know that Babylon's the head of gold? Like, what I mean by that is, does this go with history? Well, first of all, he's talking to Nebuchadnezzar. This one's pretty easy. Second of all, he says, you are the head of gold. That one's pretty easy. But also, we know historically this empire lasted from 605 to 565 BC. Look it up. If you're any history fans out there, yeah, okay, look it up for us. Let us know. Not right now. But, so anyway, we know this is the first empire. It goes with history. Okay, so let's go to the second one. It says, after you there will rise another kingdom inferior to you, and then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. So this is the second and the third kingdom. So let's start with the second one. What country is this, or what empire is the second one? Anybody know? Someone said it. Okay, yeah. You know, you're supposed to raise your hand and talk after your turn. But yeah, okay. So, so this is Persia. How do we know this? Well, history tells us that Media-Persia conquered Babylon. So we know this is the next one. They ruled from 565 to 350 BC. If you're not really like, you know, how do we know this is Media-Persia? Well, there's actually two more prophecies we're going to get into in Daniel that talk about these same empires. They just use different dreams. One of them, Daniel dreams. And this one here, Daniel 8:20, says the ram which you saw with the two horns represents the kings of Media and Persia, which is one kingdom. So it literally directly says Media-Persia here, which is really cool. Like, it's cool the Bible actually tells us prophecy and oftentimes interprets it for us. We don't have to do all this guessing. This is not like Nostradamus type stuff. This isn't 2012 kind of things. It actually just tells us. Really cool. What you'll notice as you read this, though, you'll see the second kingdom is inferior to him, and then the third one is of bronze. So you see them kind of deteriorating over time, which is interesting because we like to think humanity always progresses. If you look at histories, like scholars of history, they actually don't all think that. But regardless, what this is talking about is the reign of authority. Like, Nebuchadnezzar is the man. He said, you guys can't tell me the dream. You're all just dead. I'm going to kill you. Like, no, I don't have to talk to anybody. I'm the king, right? Later on, this becomes different. We actually see the Persian king Cyrus later in Daniel. He liked Daniel. He's like friends with him. but he made this decree that if anybody didn't do this one thing, then that person would die. Turns out Daniel didn't do that thing. So what had happened? Daniel got thrown in the lion's den. And Cyrus was like, no! What did I do? Nebuchadnezzar had been like, who cares what decree I put out? I'm the king, right? But Cyrus was like bound to his own decrees, which shows just kind of this lessening of authority and more like checks and balances kind of thing like we have today. That's kind of interesting as we go. It's this trajectory. So this third one here, which is funny, these two kingdoms are one verse. But a third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. Now, does anybody know which one this is without, if you didn't see my picture though? Rusty, you know?
Roman?
No.
Greeks.
Yeah, Greeks, yeah. That's the fourth one. So yeah, the next one is the Greek Empire. This is Alexander the Great. How do we know that? Well, Daniel also tells us this one. Pretty cool. It says the shaggy goat represents the kingdom of Greece. So, and of course, and again, the goat and the horns thing, that's just a different dream. That's about the same empires. Okay, so I know that can be a little confusing. We'll get to it later. There's actually going to be 5 prophecy teachings in Daniel. This is part 1. But Alexander the Great, you may have heard of him. He conquered the world, the known world, in a really short period of time. But eventually, his kingdom was broken up into 4 parts, 4 generals, and kind of, again, this like decentralization of authority. So this is these are the next 2 here. We got the Second Empire, Media Persia. And it's got the pointing to the chest area there. Then we got Greece with the bronze, and it has the verses there as well. So we're kind of going down. He's interpreting the statue as it goes down. And so what's the 4th one? Rusty, what is it again?
Rome.
Yeah, Rome. Awesome. We got that one. So, yeah, Rome. So 4th kingdom, Daniel 2:40. It says, then there will be a 4th kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. So, like iron that breaks in pieces, it'll crush and break all these in pieces. This sounds like Rome to me. They were brutal. They were a brutal empire. We also know from history that they were the ones that conquered Greece. They lasted a really long time. So I've written down here dates I found: 80 BC to 1100 AD. There's some wiggle room on the end there with different parts of Rome and whatnot, but it was a long time. They were an empire of brutality. They crushed the rest. They made crucifixion, famous because of their brutality. And what's kind of interesting is I want you to stay with me here. For these kingdoms so far, we got ancient Rome down here. These 4 kingdoms, almost all biblical scholars agree to interpret Daniel. These 4 countries and kingdoms are talking about these 4 things in Daniel's dream. It's an almost unanimous thing. It is not up for debate. We're not just saying this kind of thing. We don't just think this. You can look this up and see what people think. It's really cool. So this would be Daniel telling King Nebuchadnezzar, your kingdom isn't going to last. The most powerful man on earth. This is what he was up late dreaming about, by the way. Am I gonna be able to continue to reign? And the answer, little Daniel told him, was no, you're not. Actually, all these empires aren't going to last. So up through here, like I said, everybody agrees. This next part is where there starts to get kind of different camps on interpretation. I'm going to present one that seems very compelling. So this next part here, Daniel 2:41 to 43. In that you saw the feet and toes. So this is, where are we at? Oh no, pressed it too much. Okay, so we got the feet, you got the toes, you know where that is? So, okay, we got the feet and toes. This becomes important because it's like Rome and then it spreads out, okay? Like the feet and toes of it. So the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It'll be a divided kingdom, but it'll have in it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with clay. So this is the 5th empire. Some people just say this is an extension of Rome, which doesn't really make sense to me. But this is similar to Rome, but different. How's it different? Well, it's mixed up. There's clay and iron, but also a divided kingdom. So this is like Rome, but it's divided. But it's still very powerful. And so the interpretation of this isn't just talking about Rome. I think the biggest reason to believe this is because as you read through Daniel and you look at Revelation and connect these all together, you see that this kingdom is supposed to be talking about the one that's going to be there at the end of time. So, yeah, Rome's not here. So I think that's a big one, but also there's something called the prophetic gap. You guys heard of that? When there's a prophetic gap, it means it's within one train of thought, there's prophecy in the first part about one thing, and then the second part's about another. This happened when Jesus got up there and he read from the scroll of Isaiah, and he sets it down mid-prophecy, and he said, this has been fulfilled. And then, anybody know what the rest of it was about? Yeah.
Death and sacrifice.
That was the first part, but the second part was his second coming, right? So, but you're right for the first part. So he's like, he's coming here. He's like, I have fulfilled this. I am the suffering servant that's come for you. And then the second part was about what was going to happen in the second coming, which is going to be a long time later. But it's all within one verse. Really, and we could talk about why does God do that. I think there's a lot of cool reasons. Mainly, so like people can't self-fulfill these, I think is a big one. But anyway, we can get into that at another time. So this empire is perhaps in our future too right now. Still to come because it's at the end times here. So let's see some more details about this. It says, as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in fact, that you saw the iron mixed with common clay, they will combine with one another in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron doesn't combine with pottery. A lot of stuff about how they're going to combine, but they're not going to be really that united, but they'll be kind of united, they'll be really strong. So probably like it sounds like mixed like ethnically, like not just one people group. We also see this later in Daniel 2 with 10 kings. You could see, we could read that as well. But so it seems like this is going to be a 10-nation union coming from the area of Rome, not united completely, but united economically and militarily. Does this sound like anything? Like, for tons of years, this seemed really impossible. Like, Europe uniting, they hate each other. They've been fighting each other forever. Literally, they've been doing war after war after war after war. Even if you like read just like Scottish history, just people in Scotland fighting each other, right? Imagine all the other countries. Like, it's crazy. But does this sound like anything right now? Yeah. Yeah, the European Union. Yeah, I think that's exactly what I'm about to talk about. So I'm glad someone could see it without me putting it on the PowerPoint. Yeah. So this sounds really similar to the European Union. So I want to look at this, see what you guys think. This would be called New Rome or Future Rome, Empire 5, Daniel 2 and Daniel 7. And so again, this seemed impossible throughout history until the European Union started coming up. So this kind of started after 2 world wars, and they're like, why are we just killing each other all the time? So Churchill actually said, we must build a kind of United States of Europe. In this way, only will hundreds of millions of toilers be able to regain the simple joys and hopes which make life worth living. And I think it's interesting because they actually didn't join it right away, and they just had the whole Brexit thing too, so I don't get them, but it's interesting. Brexit's actually made the European Union more cohesive because the people who don't want to be part of it now aren't there, so they're able to actually get stuff done. Anyway, so that was the 46. That kind of snowballed all the way to 92. You know, back in the day before you guys were born, all the way to 92. Not long ago, this treaty was signed. And it said the Union shall set itself the following objectives: to promote economic and social progress through the creation of an area without internal frontiers, through the establishment of economic and monetary union, ultimately including a single currency. This is crazy. Our lifetime pretty much has always been this, but it was not like that. That'd be the euro, right? You can go throughout Europe, cross borders. I've only been to Europe. It's a long story, but I've only been there for 23 hours on my way back from India. But so I've never crossed borders, but I know people who have, and it seems like it's like going from Ohio State to Pennsylvania, but there's no crazy, terrible toll road. You just can kind of do it, right? So that's crazy. And there's also now this was just in 2017 from the BBC. It says they're going to give impetus to joint defense plan. So 23 countries are going to are planning on this, and you can read in the news, there's actually newer articles about this, being able, if there's a crisis, they can have a single commander and unite their militaries if need be. It's kind of like a doomsday scenario thing, but it's like, whoa, this is kind of coming together here. Like, this is a strong, like, union here that's not just like kind of some, like, not to say the UN isn't anything, but it's not just kind of this nice thing. But it's like, wow, these guys are really united in some ways. And I wanted to just kind of show you how powerful this kind of quote nation could be. We got the GDP comparisons, which is like how much money they're pulling in and whatnot. So the EU is higher than both the United States and China. That's kind of crazy. Population, you might think the United States is big. Like Texas is almost as big as Europe, you know? Like, come on, we can take them. But population-wise, not the case. We're 328 million, they're 446 million. That's wild. How about this, though? I'm gonna show you this. I didn't mean to put it up yet, but you can see their faces. I was gonna say, but come on, we are America, right? We could take the European Union. Oh my gosh, like no big deal. We're America. We're the best country on earth. It's funny. I feel like not that many people I know even believe that anymore. But that's kind of like what we've grown up with, right? Like this is who we are. There's nothing that United States can't do. Like, there's no way we're in a lot of debt or something, right? And then you see this, and it's kind of crazy. There it is. When Trump started, it was like $21 trillion in debt. Just like 10 years ago, it was half of that. So we're like doubled in almost 10 years. Now you see we're almost at 28 trillion. You can go, I bet we might be at 28 now. This was from earlier today. But you literally see this clock just going up and up and up if you go to usdebtclock.org. But it's at $27 trillion. It's like, oh my gosh, what is going to happen? Does that even mean anything? I don't really get it. But the point of all this, I'm not just kind of bringing this up for no reason. I'm really not even saying like the European Union is this new Rome. I don't think you could dogmatically say that. But I think it's really interesting that something like that is possible, right? That was not the case throughout history. And I'm not saying it's not either. Is that 28?
No, we're only up about 128 or 102 billion.
Oh, that's it. Okay, we're good. In the last 4 hours. Okay, I did like that at work today. So I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm not saying it's not either. What I'm saying is something like that's going to come, and the point is that these nations throughout history don't last. Empires fall. That's my point. America, our great country that's been here for so long, is not going to be the empire forever. And I'm not trying to say any political thing, but I'm saying this is what Daniel was saying to Nebuchadnezzar. You're the head of gold, but what comes after you? Nebuchadnezzar wouldn't have even thought that something came after him. So, are you kidding me? I'm divine, is what he thought. And so empires fall. Something like this is going to come in at the end of history. Then God's luckily going to do something about it, because it's not going to be a godly empire. And so let's look at my favorite of the empires we're going to talk about here in Daniel 2:44-45. It says, "In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It'll crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever." Praise God. So this united kingdom I just talked about is not going to be godly, not going to be peaceful, and things are going to go wrong, and God's going to come in and have a say about it. You know, right now, God is allowing human rule. He's allowing free will, so we have a chance to come to know Him. He wants every single person on earth to come to know Him and come into a relationship with Him. That's why He lets all of these things happen. So you personally can come to the knowledge that God sent His Son down to die for you. And so He lets this kind of stuff happen. But this is the exciting part, because remember that stone in the prophecy that's going to come? It's more like, I like to picture it like a big mountain falling on top of the statue. Like at first, Nebuchadnezzar is like, this is this huge statue. It's crazy. It's amazing. And then this huge mountain falls on top of it. Like, oh wow, that was like a little Lego compared to that. And that's God's kingdom coming. It's this huge, huge rock that crushes it into pieces like an avalanche. And so this is what God's kingdom here is. And so really our choice is which kingdom do we want to put our hope in. We could talk about all these different kingdoms, but there's two kingdoms. The world's kingdom or God's kingdom, like it says here. What do you want to put your hope in? People put their hopes in all those other empires throughout history. All the economic things, all the investments, all the various ways to put hope into something. And they were failed. The only one that does not fail you is God. And he's saying, do you want to put your trust in me? In the same way, much like Nebuchadnezzar, our lives also won't last forever. And so we have this limited time on earth to decide, who do we want to trust? Luckily, to get into Babylon, you had to be like captured and made a slave. That's how you became part of their company, or part of their country. Luckily, to be part of God's country, if you will, all you have to do is ask, and he'll grant you citizenship forever, eternally. That is amazing. To be with the best kingdom ever on earth, all you got to do is say, I want that. You don't have to be a good person. You don't have to even come to IP or come to church. You just have to, in the privacy of your heart, ask for Jesus' death to count for you. And then you're granted citizenship for eternity. It's really beautiful. He comes and destroys, man. Like it's an avalanche. He is going to destroy, but he comes first with peace and love and offers this to you at no cost, except for the cost that he paid on the cross with his son, right? And so this is that rock. I think the rock should be way bigger, but apparently it destroys it there. And so let's put our hope in what lasts. That's what I think this semester should be about, putting our hope in what lasts. 1 Peter 2:6, it's hard to read, but it says, I lay in Zion a stone. So we're going with the stone thing. A chosen and precious cornerstone. And the one who believes in him will never be put to shame. People who believed in Nebuchadnezzar and these other kings were put to shame. They were. Their life did not amount to what they thought it would. If you put your hope into Jesus, it will not be put to shame. That's what he's guaranteeing us here. I think that's just so beautiful and so awesome. But he's not saying here, go and be a hermit. He's just saying God's kingdom is what's going to last. So put your hope there. It's not saying like, okay, quit your job, all that stuff, just go live on a mountain. But he's just saying put your hope in what lasts, which are people, relationships, and things that are going to last for eternity. So this is kind of a side point. I wanted to make this as I'm wrapping up here. This made me think that we need to fight to have a spiritual perspective. I was thinking about this because I had to Zeb and I had to study a lot to understand all this stuff, but it was really fun to look at the word and really enjoy it. And prophecy like that, really, when you understand it and when you're convinced this is from God, he's telling the future, it's really solidifying for your faith. It's like, man, this is not just some wishy-washy thing I'm believing with some Bible study or something that just is like a social club. No, this is the God of the universe speaking to us. This is solidifying. I don't know about you guys, but I'm not I'm not the most stable person in my feelings or my thought life. I don't know if you know that or you think that about me, but every 2 minutes I have some negative, crazy thought that I have to wrestle with. And it really comes down to, am I going to let those feelings reign, or am I going to trust what the Lord says in his word? And I was just really convicted by that, because it's really, really cool that we have the chance to not trust our feelings, but instead trust the word and what God says. Prophecy really has been showing me that. Praise the Lord, we have his word, I also think we got to have a sense of urgency this semester. This world's passing away. I think you guys have seen that with COVID and everything. I know a lot of people I was talking to, it's sad, freshman, sophomore in college. Put so much hope throughout high school. I'm going to go to college. It's going to be great. I'm going to have fun. We're going to party, all that. And then COVID came, and it's like, nope. There's half of it gone. You've been sitting on your computer, plagiarizing this whole time. And it's like, wow, that was great. sorry. But my point is just like, what are you going to put your hope in these other things that aren't going to last? These things that you thought were going to be so great, or do you want to put your hope in something that will and that you're not going to be put to shame, like that passage says? And same thing with the sense of urgency. Like, if other people are going through that, we should have this sense of urgency to rescue people out of the sinking ship too. Like, our country is crazy right now, and no political change is going to change all that. And why not instead offer them something that really does matter? So, just to sum up here, what we talked about, Zeb was talking about how God really does reveal himself. We see that. We should not back away from that. We should offer these kind of proofs up to people confidently, because God tells us the future and it's beautiful. We should go against the flow like Daniel. We can go against the flow, not just kind of like go with the flow and let things happen, but instead take an active approach in this messed up world and show people the God who loves them and show them what he's all about. And then lastly, the world's empires won't last. Put your hope in what actually will, which is the Lord and his kingdom. So that is what we have tonight. Okay, so what we normally do here is see if there are any comments or questions. So, anybody got comments or questions?
Alex?
Alright. So, I was just like thinking back, Zeb, when you were talking about, I'm pretty sure it was around verse 27, where like Daniel is talking to the king and he made the point of like everybody else around, or like, oh shoot. Oh yeah, like just going up to King Nebuchadnezzar and being like, hey, so while you were just like sleeping in bed, dreaming away, God came to me and like coming with all this like authority and like stature. It just like made me think of like everybody else that was there were probably just like shitting bricks. Like, they're like, who is this guy coming up to the king with all this audacity? And like, I would be so scared if I was those guys. I'd be like, yep, we're gonna die for sure. You just said that exactly what we told him. But then he's like, no, but God can do all these things. And like, it just started making me think like how much Daniel trusted God in that moment. To not only like say what he said, but with the authority that he said it and with the confidence that he said it. Like, this dude could have you killed with a look.
Yep.
And instead of being like so afraid of that, he like pretty much feared God more. It was like, no, like I'm gonna trust you and I'm going to say these things to him because that's what you told me to do. That's what you showed me. And it wasn't like timid either. Like even if I had like the trusting guys to go up to him and be like, yeah, so here's what the dream said. I would be so timid, I would be so shy, I'd be scared for my life, be like, yep, he's gonna kill me for sure, but let's go for it, I guess.
Yeah.
He had no doubt in God that he was like going to be spared, that all of their lives were going to be spared.
At the same time, if you think about it, they were already going to be killed.
Oh, true.
So,
I didn't even think about that.
so he, in a way, had nothing to lose. So he was just like, "All right, Lord, what do you got? Like, what do we know?"
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't trying to like have like a "screw you, king, I'm going out with a bang" attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really just like you said, truly just confident in the Lord,
Yeah.
and knew that He was going to provide, and knew that this confidence he had wasn't his own confidence, but the confidence of God. And God was trying to say like, knock, knock, Nebuchadnezzar, like I'm here, and you need to realize that I'm real, and I'm the one that actually reveals things, not these fake sorcerers and astrologers, but instead the real, true God of the universe. I'm the one who actually works.
Yeah. Yeah, Audie?
To kind of go off of what you're saying, Zed, it just hit me during that part especially, like, talking about revelation, like God is giving revelation to Nebuchadnezzar and the astrologers and the Chaldeans and all the whatever wise guys, and
Wise
these are all
guys.
like Gentiles, you know, like they're not even his promised like chosen people or whatever. And like yeah, it's kind of intimidating or whatever news, but it's like he loved them enough to tell them and to communicate with them. And I just think that is kind of crazy. Like, wow, okay, look at God. Not only is he revealing himself to Daniel and his like people, his chosen people, you would think, oh yeah, of course he'd talk to them or whatever, but like the Gentiles and all these, everybody, because everyone's actually going to be involved in his plan. Like that mountain Zach was talking about, that kingdom involves like everybody in the world. So I just think that's really cool and shows that God's revelation like is just proof of his love for us. And
Heck
even
yeah.
if it's like tough truth or like not what we want to hear or whatever. Like I'm sure Neb didn't like love hearing that or whatever.
Yeah.
We're teaching on the next week's chapter, so
Yeah.
he really didn't love it.
Well, yeah, but it's like, but at the same time, it was eating at him. And,
Yeah.
and another part with that is like, it was cool. I don't know if we talked about it, but there's a few verses if you didn't notice. Like, Daniel also saved all those magicians and sorcerers, like people who were very like the opposite of godly, and he still saved them. He went out of his way to do it. Actually, pretty
yeah,
cool.
people who are involved in this system of fear, like Ian was talking
Yeah.
about, and like caught up in it, God had compassion on all those people. I
Yeah.
just think that's so cool.
Sarah, I saw your hand a long time ago, so you go first.
Great teaching, guys. I was really excited because I actually started reading Daniel before I knew we were going to do it in IP. And what stuck out to me then is even like more in my face now because you guys had the same thought that I did when I first read it, which was like about Daniel. Like throughout the whole book, I was just like, the thing that just kept hitting me was Daniel's first knee-jerk reactions. Like every time he is like faced with adversity, like especially here where he's like about to get killed, like it's not to give up and like do things on his own or like try to weasel his way out. Like he just goes straight to the Lord and to his friends and the people that care about him.
Yeah.
And like it just like really hit a chord with me of like, do I do that? Like am I running to the Lord with I mean, I don't face death every day. I've never done, like, you know, no one's ever tried to kill me. So it's like if Daniel could do that and run to the Lord when he's facing something so terrifying like that, like, why can't I do that with, like, the small things in my life? Like, work, school, you know, relationships. Like, it's just, like, the whole I once read a book where, like, literally it was all about these huge comparisons of like the worst things in history, and it was like, well, why can't you, if these people could do this, why can't you? It was basically like the whole point of it, and I feel like I love a lot of these stories like this because it's so true. It's like if Daniel can run to the Lord when he's facing death, like why can't I just say yes to and follow him on these small things in my own life?
Yeah, that's a really good point. Good stuff. Oh my God.
Oh boy. All right, Henry.
Yeah, so one, good job in this teaching, but something I noticed throughout the Old Testament and the Bible is that God has these really weird like dreams or like visions that he gives to these kings, whether it be the Pharaoh in Egypt,
Yeah.
with Joseph, or here with Nebuchadnezzar. And it's something that's just so interesting is that how he plants these visions. It's like all these other dreams and stuff, like you could just have a normal dream and it's like whatever, yeah, okay, I'll just do the normal thing. But these dreams always like tend to be so disturbing or so like offsetting, like something unnatural almost. That, every time they seek for true answers, and you know, every situation here, it's like, no, I don't want something that's just kind of like, you know, phony. This is something that's like truly different. We want to actually hear what that truth is. I don't know. I know a lot of times God, you know, will set things up for His plan to go through. Are these like visions specifically set up for Daniel or Joseph? Like, what's your input on that?
Like, did God give this dream to Nebuchadnezzar on purpose? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, obviously He gave it to him, but it's like, why did He do it the way He did?
That's a good question. I can't say for sure because He didn't tell us. But I think there's a lot of interesting things you could think about. I do think He purposely gave Nebuchadnezzar that dream, and purposely, you could think about this all the way back to Daniel getting captured and enslaved. Daniel could have been like, what the hell, God? And God's like, I got a plan for you. And he's like, yeah, being a slave, great. But there actually really was a plan for him. So I think you can look at that end of it too, you know. But yeah, no, that's an interesting topic. Why exactly did God use that? Yeah. Fred, you got something for it?
Yeah, really, really good teaching, guys. Daniel's been super interesting so far, and it's been really interesting too, as far as like practical application and stuff. I wasn't really expecting that. I've never read Daniel before, and I like knew it was gonna go like a Bible story. I'm not expecting all of the like very like practical like now application for it.
Yeah.
The one thing that really hit me as you guys were talking about it, we're talking about coronavirus, talking about the government stuff, and it's like almost like two of the biggest things that have been super, super painful for the world lately have been coronavirus and then like government. So it's like basically boils down to like people are afraid that the government that takes care of them is gonna crumble, and people are afraid that they're gonna get sick and die. But like both of those things are going to happen at some point.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was really interesting. It's like you can take that perspective of like God controlling your life. Both of those things that are like taking the world to its knees right now until we go away. It's like you're not relying on, you know, just this life, just this like one brief moment. You're not just relying on like, this super temporary government, like you know, like the God of the universe to take care of you. Just give you all peace.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. It's like sometimes it's like maybe these fears are irrational. Sometimes it's like, well, maybe that's just showing you should put your trust in something that won't fade away. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool coming from you, because now the government with the chip in your head knows what you said, and so they're trying to snipe it.
Probably it, guys.
You went out with a bang, though. I like it. Go ahead, Jerry.
I think what's also really interesting is that, like, specifically in regards to prophecy, is like Daniel knew that they were going to get deported. I can't remember if Ian talked about that last week with Jeremiah. Like the prophet Jeremiah was like,
Yep.
you guys are sitting against God. This is the consequences. You're gonna get deported. Be prepared. And then like the famous Jeremiah like 29 or whatever verse, he's like, I have a plan for you. That everyone like takes out of this context. And it's like, that's really cool. Like Daniel's like, at least I don't know, from my perspective, it was like, oh, God told us what was gonna happen. And so I like know that the Lord is sovereign. And so now I can put my faith even more in Him, that if this dream is like a thing that we need to interpret, He's going to reveal that to us. Like He already revealed to us that we were going to get deported. So He's there for us now, and I think that's a really cool thing. And like, that's why I really like prophecy also, because it is proof that God is actually like working in the history timeline. He's outside of it, and He controls it, but it's also that I can trust Him and that He knows what He's doing, and that He's a good God.
Like, yeah. Talking about how Jeremiah interacts with this is really cool.
Yeah.
That just reminded me like, if you're confused at all after this teaching, it's okay. Keep coming back. It's gonna make more sense as it all pieces together.
Really?
So last one, Jason.
Yeah.
Just say much to build on with Jerry's point, this isn't just out of the couple of books leading up to Daniel. It also includes the prior prophets of Isaiah and Ezekiel after 2 Kings, seeing the downfall of Israel and being said hundreds of years in advance, generations in advance, that God was coming and bringing Babylon to use against Israel,
Right.
to break them for what they had done. But as well, during that time leading up to it and the time after, that the kingdom of God was coming to right the wrongs after Babylon. I'm not sure if it's in Ezekiel or Isaiah talking about the yoke of Babylon being harder after resistance or what have you. But then even more so, the destruction being brought against Babylon because of being used for such a purpose. So just interweaves for several books.
Isn't that freaking wild? Like God's like, okay, if you don't do this, Babylon's gonna take over. They're like, yeah. Babylon does. Like, well, it's kind of not the best fulfilled prophecy, but it was fulfilled prophecy, and it just kind of keeps happening over and over. It's amazing. Yeah, it is amazing, man. Very cool.
Yeah, God gives warning after warning after warning that this was going to happen. So it wasn't just a suddenly God was like, I feel like this. It was like numerous. Like if you read the Old Testament and go through it, you kind of get annoyed with how much He even says it over and over again. Yeah. That like you're like judgment is coming for these sins that you've turned against me and things like that. So.
Believe in that. We give him something opportunity for repent.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks guys. So we're gonna go ahead and pray it down. So I can start, and then anyone can go, and Zach can finish up. But yeah, Lord, I just thank you so much for an opportunity to get up here and teach Daniel 2. It's such a cool book, such a sweet thing that you give us revelation that you're alive and active in the world even today, Lord. You want us to know that you're there. You want to show who you are, and that's just really beautiful. I thank you so much for that. I just want to just pray that you just continue to reveal yourself to maybe anyone here who doesn't have a relationship with you, and show them that you really are like the God of the universe, the God who does reveal things, and God who's there and loves everybody. And so I pray for that. I pray for anyone who doesn't have a relationship with you, that this would be something they think about. They see this evidence, they see the prophecies and the revelations that you provide, Lord. And I pray that they at least want to have a discussion about this to just see that we're not just make things up as we go or anything, but it's a very real, very tangible, proven thing. So I just thank you for opportunity to get up here and teach with Zach, and just pray for the rest of the night that we have a fun time hanging out.
Mm-hmm.
Lord, I just want to thank you that your kingdom is here now. The mountain's already fallen, and that we have the ability and the privilege that you want for us to join that kingdom. You just showed how it was your favor, your wisdom, and your character actually through Daniel in one day. It was even his relationships that you helped him to build over time. And what a practical and also meaningful spiritual thing that he's able to just show grace and love towards everyone, and that they responded to that. Just as how we and where we are right now in the modern age with the civilization not too different from Babylon in a lot of ways, can continue to just build the kingdom. So thank you for that confidence that you're always with us. Just want to ask that you fill us with that spirit and that wisdom to treat our relationships in the way we do.
Lord, I also just want to thank you so much for just being who you are. Like, you're still the super awesome, powerful, very wise and loving God today as you were back then. And I thank you for Daniel. It's like a super cool story. I'm so excited to continue going through it. And I just want to thank you that we have you. Thank you for giving up your son to die for us so we can have a personal relationship with you. And like it's really cool. Regardless of what's going on, we can put our faith in you. Like Sarah said, and so many other people, like we can run to you. Like you're always there. And I just really want to thank you for your love and for how much you care about us and you love us unconditionally.
Yeah, Lord, thank you. We could all get together as a home church. Thank you for a place to be. I thank you for dying on the cross for our sins, giving us a chance to enter your kingdom and start like eternal life now into forever. Super cool. I just thank you that we're not crazy to think that the world kind of sucks. And you're telling us, yep, I got something better for you. So I just pray we trust you on that and invest in things that are going to have a, eternal, internal compound interest like we were talking about on the retreat. And I pray this semester would really be fruitful, that we could go out and meet people who are lost and lonely and who need to hear your message of hope. So I just pray for those people that we don't know yet, and pray for this meeting in smaller groups situation. Pray that that's a fun time. And just thank you for what you've done, Lord. Amen.
Amen.